So today I'm going to be talking about an essential aspect of the purchase process, and that is the residential offer to purchase. Hi, I'm Shayla Duncan with the Queen Team and Remax Professionals here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So there's a few different types of offer to purchases here in Manitoba. Today, like I said, we'll be talking about the residential offer to purchase, which applies to resale homes. There is also a condo offer to purchase or a condominium offer to purchase, which of course applies to when you're purchasing a condo. There is a commercial offer to purchase, which applies to commercial properties or businesses. There is the Manitoba offer to purchase, which you would use if you're purchasing vacant land, or maybe sometimes a seasonal cabin, something along those lines. And then there is also a new home sales offer to purchase, or an agreement. A builder's agreement is what it's called. And that's for when you're purchasing a brand new home. So like I said, we'll be talking about the residential offer to purchase today. That is the most commonly used offer to purchase. And I have it pulled up on my laptop here. So we're just going to go through section by section, and I will provide a little more clarity on what the standard contract involves. What is an offer to purchase? So simply put, an offer to purchase is a formal, legally binding document that a buyer submits to a seller proposing terms to buy their property. If the seller agrees, they sign off and the offer becomes the foundation of the deal. It is important to note that this is a binding contract, so everything you include is significant. Okay, so let's start at the top of the page here. Like I said, I do have my offer to purchase pulled up here. So starting at the top of the page, we have representation, a confirmation of representation. So you're gonna have who is representing the buyer outlined, as well as who's representing the seller outlined. So their agent as well as their brokerage. And then you're just going to have the confirmation of, does the buyer's agent only represent the buyer and the seller's agent only represents the seller, or is there a joint representation here? This section also includes the seller's information, who they are and their address, as well as the buyer's information, who they are and their address. It's important to note that the seller's address is not always the same address of the subject property. It could be a rental property you're purchasing, it could be an estate sale. So don't be concerned if the seller's address doesn't always fall in line with the subject property's address. If you're concerned, just ask your realtor and they can provide you clarity on that. Heading down to section 1, so subject matters of this offer. This is where we are going to outline the legal description or the legal address of the property you are offering to purchase. This section also outlines the inclusions and the exclusions. So any chattels that you want included, so we typically see refrigerator, stove, washer, dryer, microwave, that kind of stuff in this section. In the exclusion section, we typically see none, but something that could be included would be maybe a second fridge would be explicitly excluded from the purchase. So heading down, we come to the next section, which is purchase and sale price and payment. So this is arguably one of the most important sections because it outlines what you are offering to purchase this home for. So you will write the total purchase price here, mortgage details can be written here, as well as the deposit amount you are offering will be written here. Heading down, we next have possession. So possession shall be given by 9 a.m. the 20th day of November 2024. So this is where you will write down your desired possession. So the next section is the seller promises as to the status of the property. So this outlines essentially that the property at the time of possession it'll be free of any encroachments. So You're not concerned that there's a shed that's over on your neighbor's property, or maybe a garage that the roof line hangs over slightly on your neighbor's property. This section also outlines anything to do with zoning. So if there's any concerns or issues or something funny going on with zoning, this is where that would need to be explicitly outlined. Typically, we see none written in here. If you carry down slightly, still in the same section, you do see something that says additional promises. So typically we will write in here, all mechanical, electrical, plumbing, appliances, and inclusions will be in working order on possession day. It's a standard clause to just include in an offer, and this is the section that you'd write that in. Heading down the next section, number 5, is that the seller promises at the time of possession. So here we typically will just write none. What you will insert here is if there is any rental contracts. So sometimes there might be a hot water tank or an AC that is rented by the seller. If you as the buyer are planning to assume that rental, this is where that needs to be outlined. So you would need to get the contract details from the seller and include that in your offer. Heading down the page to section 7. So this is in regards to the property disclosure statement, or you may often hear realtors call it a PDS. So for those that don't know, a PDS is a 19-question voluntary document that can be completed by a seller, and it's asking questions essentially about the condition of the property while the sellers lived there and owned it. So questions such as, have you ever experienced any water infiltration? Are you aware, has the property ever been used as a grow-op? Questions like that just provide a little bit of information on the history of the property. It is really important to note that a property disclosure statement is not a warranty, it is not a guarantee. It's a great tool that you can use to get to know the property and its history. But at the end of the day, you hope the next person is as honest as you, but you cannot guarantee anything. So it's important to just take it with a grain of salt. If you already have a property disclosure statement before writing, you will cross out part A. If you do not have a property disclosure statement and you need to request one, you will cross out part B and then fill in 7A and 8A. And if the seller is not providing a property disclosure statement whatsoever, then you will cross out and initial this whole section. Okay, heading down the page to section 8, conditions benefiting the buyer. So these are, as it says, any conditions you want to insert that will benefit you as a buyer. So this is where we typically see your financing condition filled out. Maybe you want a home inspection. This is where you will insert those conditions. Now it's important to note that any condition of an offer needs to have a time frame in when it will be completed by. So for example, this offer is subject to financing being completed by or being approved by 7 p.m. November 18th, 2024. This will provide you with a deadline in which you need to satisfy or remove those conditions by. If you are not including any conditions of your offer, you will just cross out this section and have it initialed. There is a section 8D that just provides a blank line that you can insert any conditions that might not be already pre-written in here. So that might be that the offer is subject to the sale of your home, a condition like that. Section 9, conditions benefiting the seller. So more often than not, we see this just saying none. There's typically not conditions that the seller requests, but if they were to request something, this is where that would be inputted. All right, heading down the page, we get to mutual promises and provisions. So I'm not going to really go into depth on this one. A quick overview of this section is really that the taxes for the property will be adjusted based on the possession day. The property is the responsibility of the seller until possession day, and it must be in substantially the same condition as when the buyer originally viewed it. This section also outlines anything that is to survive closing. So typically we would write 4B here. And if we go back and look at what 4B was, that was the clause that we included that said all mechanical, electrical, plumbing appliances and inclusions to be in working order on possession day. So we would write 4B in this section just to state that that survives closing. Another way you may use this section that says what is to survive closing is, for example, if you're buying a property with a pool, and let's say it's January, you can't check the condition of the pool at that time of purchase. And so maybe you insert in this section that by such and such a date, the pool is to be in good working order. And this allows you the time that you may take possession in March, but you still have the ability to ensure the pool is in working order once the snow melts and you're able to check it and run it. And if it's not, you have that protection of the contract. Okay, so carrying on down the page, we come to representations by the brokerage. So this would be if the brokerage was to have promised anything, 99.9% of the time you will see this say none. So next section, we have deadline for acceptance by the seller. So you would fill this out, leaving the offer valid and open until a certain date and time. Typically, it's the same day that you write it, or maybe a day later. And after this time, your offer does expire. So you need a response from the seller by that time. Carrying on, we come to other terms. So in this section, you might have included that the vendor is to allow access to the property for an appraisal purpose, or that the vendor is to supply the survey certificates and zoning memorandum, or any other terms that you want included in your offer. At the bottom of the page, we have the buyer's signature and the time that they signed. And then we get to the last page of the offer. So the last page of the offer is for the response by the seller. So here they will either accept your offer as written, they will decline your offer, or they will counter your offer. So if they counter your offer, they will write in there what they are countering it with. They will give you a time in which you need to respond by, and then you will have to, if you accept, you will have to sign stating that you accept their counter offer. The bottom of this page also has a section for the Homesteads Act, which is just essentially, let's say, the sellers are a wife and husband, and one of them is on title, the other is not. The Homestead Act would apply to that one that is not on title, and they would have to sign off, essentially giving their permission to sell this property. So that is a very quick overview of the residential offer to purchase. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to provide as much clarity as we can. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.